When you picture this continent, the first thing that might come to mind is its breathtaking landscapes, rugged coastlines, majestic mountains, and vast deserts. But there's a history that's often forgotten. Long before these lands were ever seen by Europeans, they were home to countless nations and tribes. For these people, the land wasn't just territory, it was home, culture, and identity. Then, on one fateful day, everything changed. Ships appeared on the horizon, bringing with them people who had never set foot on this land before. This is where our story truly begins. In the spring of 1803, two American diplomats, Robert Livingston and James Monroe, were in Paris, closing what they probably thought would be the deal of a lifetime. They were negotiating with Napoleon Bonaparte, who was eager to sell a huge chunk of land in North America. With a single signature, the size of the United States would double. And the price? A mere $15 million. This transaction would become known as the Louisiana Purchase. It seemed like an incredible bargain, but there was a catch. What the United States bought wasn't the land itself, but the imperial rights to it. France didn't fully own the land, they simply had control over it, and now they were giving up that control, letting the United States claim it. If the United States truly wanted to own this land, they would have to deal with the people who already lived there, tribes and nations that were established long before Europeans ever dreamed of crossing the Atlantic. So, what was the plan? Early American leaders, including George Washington, envisioned a government that would treat Native American tribes with fairness and humanity. Washington himself argued that treaties with the tribes should follow the great principles of justice and humanity. Sounds noble, right? Instead of conquest, the plan was to negotiate and sign formal treaties, compensating the tribes for their land. After all, this was a nation founded on ideals like justice, freedom, and tranquility. But in practice, things didn't quite go according to plan. As the United States expanded, they sought more land, and many tribes were unwilling to give up their ancestral homes. What started as negotiations quickly deteriorated into deception and conflict. The U.S. government resorted to broken promises, shady deals, and ultimately war. Let's look at the tribes near the Great Lakes. They drew a dividing line declaring, "This river is the border, cross it and there will be trouble." The United States ignored the warning, leading to conflict. They lost 2 wars but eventually managed to force the tribes to give up their land, which became what we now know as Ohio. That pattern of deceit continued elsewhere. In Alabama, the Muskogee Nation agreed to sell some of their land with the promise that the rest would be preserved. But before long, white settlers moved in, encroaching on Muskogee land. Tensions rose and the U.S. Army was called in, forcing the Muskogee out entirely, in clear violation of the treaty. The Sioux and Arapaho nations faced similar betrayals. Despite defeating the U.S. Army on several occasions, their treaties were ignored when gold was discovered on their land. Boundaries were redrawn, roads were built, and gold seekers flooded their territory. Treaties and justice were conveniently ignored. Eventually, many tribes, realizing that saying no to the U.S. government meant war, began signing treaties, accepting compensation, and moving from their lands. This response was born out of a grim recognition of their inability to withstand the combined pressure of U.S. military might and the relentless advance of settlers. Over nearly 100 years, the United States signed 368 treaties with tribes. Yet, these treaties often proved to be mere formalities. The government frequently violated them, and tribes were systematically displaced. The land that was once the heart of thriving cultures was increasingly occupied by settlers eager to claim new territories. This whole process was wrapped in a facade of legality. Treaties, documents, and official paperwork made it seem like everything was above board. But behind the scenes, it was a ruthless campaign of expansion. The government used the cloak of legality to justify its actions, all the while pursuing its imperialistic agenda. One of the most heartbreaking chapters is the forced relocation of the 5 civilized tribes from the Deep South. These tribes, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Muskogee, and Seminole, had long lived alongside settlers. Despite their attempts to peacefully coexist, they were not spared from the relentless expansionist drive. The Cherokee Nation's struggle is notable. Georgia passed laws undermining Cherokee sovereignty, leading them to fight for their rights in court. The Supreme Court ruled in their favor, but without presidential support it was meaningless. President Andrew Jackson ignored the ruling, championing the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Indian territory was promised to be safe, but history shows those assurances were hollow. From 1831 to 1838, The U.S. government expelled nearly 100,000 members of the 5 civilized tribes. They were forced on grueling journeys of over 1,000 miles through harsh weather and treacherous terrain to their new homes. This forced migration became known as the Trail of Tears, a grim testament to the suffering these tribes endured. The Cherokee, who called it Nu Na Da Ul Tsun Yi, the trail where we cried, experienced immense hardship. Some resisted only to be met with military force. Their homelands lay empty, ready to be exploited by cotton planters and their slaves, fueling the South's booming economy. The exact death toll from this forced relocation varies in estimates, with figures ranging from 3,000 to 15,000. While the precise number remains unknown, the crucial point is understanding the systematic nature of this devastation. It was a calculated campaign of ethnic cleansing disguised as legal and bureaucratic procedure. The impact of this dark chapter was profound and far-reaching. The methods used in the United States served as a chilling example of how a government could pursue expansion at the cost of human suffering. This historical precedent even influenced future atrocities, as seen when Hitler referenced American policies in his own genocidal campaigns. Thank you for joining me on this journey through a pivotal and tragic period of American history. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the complex legacy of these events in our next episode. If you found this story insightful, please consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell to stay updated on our latest content. We appreciate your interest and support as we delve into these important historical narratives. See you in the next video.